Property taxes, homeowners insurance, and maintenance expenses were the top reason for mortgage delinquencies in 2024, with 37% of financial experts citing these hidden costs as the biggest risk to homeowners. Yet these expenses rarely factor into the rent versus buy calculators online. The truth: the mortgage system was designed for a workforce that stayed in one location for decades, a reality that's rapidly disappearing. Today I'm showing you the actual math behind homeownership in the remote work era, and the financial freedom that's possible when you break free from conventional thinking. The mortgage myth: what banks don't tell you. Wait, did you know that a $300,000 mortgage can actually cost you over $500,000 by the time you pay it off? That's not a typo. You're literally paying for your house almost twice over. But this shocking reality is carefully hidden behind friendly terms like affordable monthly payments and building equity. Here's what's really happening. When you sign those mortgage papers, you're not just agreeing to pay back $300,000. You're signing up for a financial relationship that banks have meticulously engineered to maximize their profits while keeping you in the dark about the true cost. Most homebuyers fixate on just two numbers: the purchase price and the monthly payment. Can I afford $1,500 a month? Seems like the only question that matters. But this tunnel vision is exactly what mortgage lenders count on. They know if you saw the complete picture up front, you might run for the hills. Let's break down what actually happens with a typical $300,000 30-year mortgage at today's rates. In the first year alone, around 80% of your payment goes straight to interest, not building equity in your home. That means if you're making a $1,500 monthly payment, only about $300 is actually reducing your loan balance. The rest? Pure profit for the bank. This front-loading of interest is brilliantly engineered through amortization schedules, complex payment structures designed to extract maximum interest early in the loan. It's no accident that mortgage calculators prominently display your monthly payment while burying the total interest paid in the fine print, if they show it at all. During the first 5 years of your mortgage, you'll build shockingly little equity through your payments. On that $300,000 loan, after 60 monthly payments, that's $90,000 out of your pocket. You'll have only reduced your principal by about $25,000. The other $65,000? Straight to the bank's pocket. Think about that for a second. 5 years of faithfully making payments, and you've barely made a dent in what you actually owe. This is why moving or refinancing early in a mortgage term can be such a financial disaster. You've paid thousands in interest with minimal equity to show for it. What's even more eye-opening is looking at how this plays out visually. If I asked you to guess what percentage of your mortgage payment goes toward building equity in your first year, what would you say? 50%? 40%? The shocking reality is that it's often less than 20%. Your payment is overwhelmingly feeding bank profits, not your net worth. By year 10 of your mortgage, things improve slightly, but you're still paying nearly 60% interest on each payment. It's only around year 15 that you finally cross the threshold where more of your payment goes to principal than interest. Let's put this in perspective. On a $300,000 mortgage with a 6% interest rate over 30 years, your total payments will add up to approximately $647,000. That's $347,000 in interest, more than the actual price of the home. Even at today's reasonable 6% interest rate, you're paying for your house almost twice over. The banking industry has mastered the art of making this enormous cost seem like a normal, even beneficial arrangement. They've successfully normalized the idea that spending 30 years paying more than double the price of an asset is somehow a smart financial move. And they've done it by keeping your focus squarely on that manageable monthly payment, never the shocking lifetime cost. What's worse, these calculations assume you'll stay in the home for the full 30 years, which few Americans actually do. The average homeowner moves every 8 to 10 years, which means they're caught in the high-interest, low-equity building phase of multiple mortgages throughout their lives. This cycle repeatedly extracts maximum interest while minimizing equity building, exactly as the banking system designed it. The hidden costs that devour your wealth. As if paying double for your house wasn't painful enough, there's a financial time bomb ticking away that most homebuyers never see coming. In states like Texas, homeowners' insurance rates have skyrocketed nearly 60% in just 5 years, an alarming trend that's playing out across the country. These insurance hikes are just the tip of a very expensive iceberg of costs that your mortgage lender conveniently forgot to mention. When you're signing those mortgage papers, the focus is always on that monthly payment, principal and interest. But here's the shocking reality. That payment is often just half of what you'll actually shell out each month to keep a roof over your head. The other half? It's being devoured by a growing army of expenses that are increasing faster than both inflation and your paycheck. Let's start with property taxes, the silent wealth killer that never stops growing. While your mortgage stays fixed, property taxes across major U.S. markets have consistently outpaced income growth year after year. This means that even if you got a modest raise this year, your property tax bill probably ate it up, and then some. In high-tax areas, some homeowners are paying more in property taxes over 30 years than they paid for their house in the first place. Then there's homeowners insurance, a cost that's becoming downright predatory in some regions. California homeowners have seen rates jump by nearly 44% in just 5 years. Florida, also up by 43%. These aren't small, incremental increases. They're budget-destroying jumps that arrive in your mailbox with little warning. Climate change is accelerating this trend, with insurance companies hiking rates or pulling out of entire regions due to increased natural disaster risks. But that's just taxes and insurance, you might say. I can handle those. Well, brace yourself for the maintenance monster. Financial experts recommend following what's called the 1 to 4% rule. Budget between 1% and 4% of your home's value every year just for maintenance. On a $300,000 home, that's $3,000 to $12,000 annually, not for upgrades or improvements, but just to keep everything working. What does that look like in practice? It's the water heater that dies during your morning shower. It's the roof that starts leaking after a heavy storm. It's the HVAC system that gives up during the hottest week of summer. These aren't optional expenses. They're urgent necessities that can't wait for your next bonus or tax refund. And if you thought you could escape by moving into a nice, neat condo or planned community, think again. Homeowners associations, HOAs, are notorious for fee increases that far exceed inflation. Even worse are the special assessments. Those surprise bills when the HOA decides the building needs a new elevator or the community pool needs resurfacing. These can run into the thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars, due immediately, with no option to say no. The financial reality gets even grimmer when you realize that nearly half of all homeowners report being blindsided by costs that were never fully explained during the buying process. You budgeted perfectly for your mortgage payment, but did anyone mention that your utilities would be triple what you paid in your apartment? Or that maintaining that beautiful yard would cost hundreds each month in water bills, fertilizer, and equipment? What's especially insidious about these costs is how they silently erode the equity you think you're building. Remember that small portion of your mortgage payment that actually goes toward principal. These escalating expenses can easily exceed that amount, meaning you're effectively losing financial ground every month despite owning more of your home on paper. Let's put this in perspective. If you're paying $1,800 for your mortgage, but another $1,700 for taxes, insurance, maintenance, HOA fees, and higher utilities, your true housing cost is $3,500 per month. And unlike your mortgage, which eventually gets paid off, these other costs never end. In fact, they only increase over time. The math becomes even more disheartening when you consider opportunity cost. That extra $1,700 per month invested over 30 years at a modest 7% return would grow to over $2 million. Instead, it simply disappears into the black hole of homeownership, never to be seen again. Mortgages, a product designed for a different era. That vanishing $2 million isn't just a financial tragedy. It's a symptom of something far more fundamental. The traditional 30-year mortgage wasn't designed for you or me. It was created for our grandparents who lived in a completely different work world. Let's travel back to the 1950s for a moment. The post-World War II era was booming with suburban expansion, and the American dream took physical form in cookie-cutter homes with white picket fences. The mortgage system we still use today was specifically engineered for this era, a time when people joined a company at 22 and received a gold watch at 65 after working there for their entire career. The 30-year mortgage made perfect sense in that world. You'd buy a house near your factory or office, settle in for decades, and slowly pay it off while working for the same employer. Geographic stability wasn't just common, it was expected. Your mortgage and your career were perfectly aligned. Fast forward to today, and we're trying to jam a square peg into a round hole. The modern workforce changes jobs every 4.1 years on average. Think about that. Between when you start your mortgage and when you finally pay it off, you might work for 7, 8, or even 10 different companies. Yet we're still signing up for housing products designed for a bygone era of employment stability. This creates a painful mismatch between how we work and how we live. Imagine getting a great job offer in another city just 3 years after buying your home. Financially, it's a disaster. You'll face closing costs and realtor fees totaling 6 to 10% of your home's value when selling. On a $300,000 house, that's up to $30,000 vanishing in transaction costs alone. Even worse, during those first few years, you've barely built any equity. Remember how the beginning of a mortgage is almost all interest? This means you're selling just as you start to make progress on actually owning the place. It's like running on a financial treadmill where you pay thousands in fees and walk away with almost nothing to show for it. I recently spoke with Jessica, a software developer who bought a home in Austin in 2019. When a dream job opportunity came up in Seattle just 2 years later, she faced a brutal choice: pass on career advancement or take a significant financial hit. After paying $25,000 in realtor fees and closing costs, I walked away with less money than my initial down payment, she told me. It felt like I was penalized for advancing my career. Jessica's story isn't unusual. The modern knowledge economy demands mobility and flexibility, the exact opposite of what the traditional mortgage system rewards. Think of all the tech workers, healthcare professionals, and consultants whose careers depend on geographic flexibility. They're playing a housing game with rules designed for factory workers who never change companies. This industrial-era financial product assumes you'll remain rooted in one spot for decades, but modern career advancement often requires mobility. It's as if we're still using landline phones in a smartphone world. The mortgage system penalizes precisely the behavior that drives success in today's job market: adaptation and mobility. The numbers tell the story clearly. A professional who relocates for work every 5 to 7 years will repeatedly incur those 6 to 10% transaction costs while building minimal equity. Over a career, this can translate to hundreds of thousands in lost wealth. All because our housing financial products don't match our work reality. Remote work has only highlighted this fundamental disconnect. Many professionals are now questioning, why lock yourself into a 30-year financial commitment tied to a specific geographic location when your income no longer depends on being there? It's a question that would have made no sense to the generation the mortgage was designed for. Consider how dramatically our workforce has changed. In the 1950s, the average worker stayed at a company for 20-plus years. Job stability was the norm, not the exception. Housing and career decisions were made with decades-long time horizons. Today's dynamic economy demands agility and adaptation, qualities the traditional mortgage actively discourages. The mortgage system has barely evolved while our work lives have transformed completely. We're trying to navigate the 21st century economy with housing financial products built for the industrial age. It's like trying to compete in Formula One while driving a Model T Ford. The remote work revolution, freedom from geographic constraints. Just as that Model T Ford was eventually replaced by better vehicles, a transformative shift in how we work has arrived that's fundamentally changing our relationship with housing. Remote work isn't just a temporary pandemic solution. It's completely rewriting the rules about where we can live and how we earn. The numbers tell a staggering story. Before 2019, less than 6% of Americans worked remotely. By 2021, that figure had more than tripled. Now in 2024, approximately 1/3 of U.S. employees engage in some form of remote work. This isn't a blip, it's a seismic economic shift that's reshaping housing markets nationwide. Think about what this means. Your earning potential is no longer chained to your zip code. For generations, we've accepted the reality that high-paying jobs cluster in expensive cities. Want that 6-figure tech salary? Better be prepared to pay $3,000 a month for a tiny apartment in San Francisco. Dreaming of that Wall Street bonus? Hope you can stomach New York City housing costs. But remote work has shattered that equation. Today, you can earn that San Francisco tech salary while living in rural Tennessee, where homes cost $200,000. You can collect that New York finance paycheck while enjoying the space and affordability of Charlotte or Jacksonville. This geographic arbitrage, earning in expensive markets while living in affordable ones, creates unprecedented financial opportunities. The Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco found that remote work accounted for a whopping 60% of housing price growth during the pandemic. This statistic reveals something profound. Where we choose to live is dramatically shifting based on this new work reality. Nearly half of remote workers who moved to a different state cited housing as their primary motivation. We're witnessing a great migration. Remote workers are fleeing expensive coastal cities for more affordable destinations that offer better quality of life. Places like Austin, Denver, and Nashville saw early waves, but now the trend has expanded to Charlotte, Raleigh, Orlando, and Jacksonville. These cities are experiencing population booms precisely because remote work makes them viable options for high-earning professionals. The impact extends beyond these emerging hotspots. Rural areas and smaller markets are also seeing housing price increases as incoming remote workers, who tend to be wealthier than the local population, drive up demand. The freedom to work from anywhere is redistributing population in ways that would have been unimaginable just 5 years ago. Certain industries have embraced location independence more than others. Tech companies led the charge, with giants like Twitter, Square, and Shopify adopting remote work as a permanent strategy. But the trend has expanded across finance, marketing, design, customer service, and consulting. Any knowledge work that doesn't require physical presence has potential for remote arrangements. This shift is creating fascinating opportunities for individuals. Consider Emma, a marketing director who kept her $130,000 Boston salary when she relocated to rural Maine. Her mortgage payment dropped from $3,200 to $1,400 per month for a house twice the size with an ocean view. Or take Marcus, a software engineer earning Silicon Valley wages while living in Boise, Idaho, saving over $2,500 monthly on housing costs alone. The housing transformation goes beyond just cost. Remote workers are prioritizing different features in their homes. Dedicated office spaces have become essential. Outdoor areas, natural light, and overall comfort take precedence when your home doubles as your workplace. Why commute to a dreary office when you can work from a sunlit porch overlooking mountains or beaches? Companies fueling this shift understand the mutual benefits. They access wider talent pools while reducing expensive office footprints. Employees gain freedom and improved quality of life. The arrangement works precisely because modern technology makes collaboration possible from anywhere with an internet connection. This revolution completely upends traditional homeownership calculations. When your income isn't tied to location, housing becomes a lifestyle choice rather than an economic necessity. You're no longer forced to spend astronomical sums to live near high-paying jobs. You can choose affordable markets while maintaining your earning potential. For the first time in modern history, millions of workers are experiencing true location freedom. They can prioritize family proximity, climate preferences, outdoor activities, or cultural amenities without sacrificing career advancement. They can escape crowded, expensive cities without taking pay cuts. They can pursue housing arrangements that truly align with their values rather than their employer's headquarters location. The down payment opportunity cost, the silent wealth killer. This freedom of location has unlocked a financial blind spot most of us never consider. What if that $60,000 down payment you're saving for a home isn't building wealth, but actually destroying it? While banks and real estate agents celebrate your journey toward homeownership, they conveniently ignore a $1 trillion math problem hiding in plain sight. That down payment sitting in your house isn't just sitting there, it's actively costing you money. Big money. Money that could transform your financial future if deployed differently. Let's run the numbers that mortgage lenders hope you never calculate. That $60,000 down payment invested in basic S&P 500 index funds over 30 years could grow to over $1 million. Not a typo. $1 million from that single chunk of cash you thought was responsibly locking into a house. And that's assuming just the average annual market return of about 10% that the S&P 500 has delivered historically. Meanwhile, what's happening to that same money when it's tied up in your home? The average house appreciates at just 3 to 5% annually. meaning your equity growth significantly underperforms what that same money could be doing in the market. Your safe real estate investment is actually the riskier bet when it comes to building long-term wealth. But at least I can tap into my home equity. I hear you saying, this is where the banks have sold us another costly illusion. Home equity is fundamentally illiquid. It's trapped in your walls, floors, and roof until you either sell the home or take on more debt to access it. Want to use that equity you've built? You'll need a HELOC or cash-out refinance, both of which come with a parade of fees. Closing costs, appraisal fees, origination charges, and of course, interest rates that put more money in the bank's pocket. Your equity suddenly doesn't seem so valuable when you're paying thousands just to access your own money. Let's look at real people who've discovered this hidden opportunity cost. One financial independence seeker decided to skip home buying entirely, instead investing his down payment in a diversified portfolio of index funds. The result? He reached financial independence years earlier than his homeowning friends, with significantly more flexibility and liquidity in his financial life. In another case, a couple decided to rent instead of buy, putting their $60,000 down payment into a balanced portfolio of stocks and bonds. After 15 years, their investment had grown so substantially that they could eventually purchase a home outright. No mortgage needed. They effectively skipped the 30-year debt cycle altogether by understanding the true opportunity cost of trapping money in a house. The psychology behind down payments is fascinating. We've been taught that putting money into a house is building something, while investing in the market feels abstract or even gambling-like to many people. This psychological trick keeps us making financially suboptimal decisions year after year, decade after decade. What's even more powerful about keeping your down payment invested is the flexibility it provides. That million-dollar nest egg can be accessed anytime, for any reason, without asking a bank's permission or paying them fees. It can fund education, emergencies, opportunities, or even a home purchase later. On your terms, not a bank's. Here's what's really happening. When you lock that $60,000 into a house, you're effectively taking $1 million pay cut over your lifetime. You're sacrificing future wealth for the psychological comfort of homeownership today. The banking industry is banking on you never doing this math, because once you see the numbers, the decision becomes startlingly clear. Consider this. Would you trade $1 million for the right to say, I own my home, even though the bank actually owns it until the mortgage is paid? Would you sacrifice a seven-figure sum for the privilege of handling your own maintenance issues and paying property taxes? When framed this way, the traditional path to homeownership begins to look less like the American dream and more like rent versus buy, the calculation banks don't want you to see. That wealth transfer mechanism doesn't stop with down payments. It extends into the very tools we use to make our housing decisions. Ever notice how nearly every rent versus buy calculator conveniently omits critical costs that make homeownership look like a steal when it's actually a potential money pit? Let me pull back the curtain on these calculators. If you've ever used one, you probably notice they almost universally push you toward buying. This isn't an accident. These calculators are often created by banks, real estate companies, and mortgage lenders, the very industries that profit when you sign on that dotted line. When you dig into how these calculators work, you'll find they systematically minimize or completely exclude major expenses that homeowners face. It's like comparing the cost of a car while only counting the monthly payment and ignoring insurance, gas, maintenance, and depreciation. Take maintenance costs, for example. Most calculators either completely ignore them or drastically underestimate them. A comprehensive calculation should include that 1 to 4% of your home's value you'll spend annually keeping everything from falling apart. On a $300,000 home, that's thousands of dollars every year that most calculators pretend doesn't exist. Property taxes get the same treatment. These calculators might acknowledge them initially, but fail to account for how they increase over time, often at rates that outpace both inflation and income growth. In many high-tax areas, homeowners are shocked to discover their property tax bills doubling within a decade. Then there's homeowners insurance, another expense that's frequently downplayed. These calculators rarely account for insurance rates skyrocketing in many regions, especially those affected by climate change. They show you today's rates without mentioning how they're trending sharply upward. But the most deceptive omission in these calculators? The opportunity cost of your down payment. Think about it. When you put $60,000 down on a house, that money isn't just gone from your checking account. It's also not growing in investments that could potentially yield significantly higher returns. A truly comprehensive calculation needs to include everything: mortgage payments, principal and interest, property taxes, homeowner's insurance, regular maintenance, major repairs, HOA fees if applicable, and the opportunity cost of your down payment and closing costs. When financial experts run these complete calculations, the results often tell a very different story than the oversimplified calculators. Over a 5-year period, renting frequently comes out ahead financially because of the lower upfront costs and the ability to invest the difference in higher return assets. This advantage becomes even more pronounced over a 10-year time frame, especially in markets where home prices aren't guaranteed to rise consistently. While homeowners are pouring money into maintenance and property taxes, renters who diligently invest their savings can build substantial wealth without the headaches of homeownership. Transaction costs make this equation even worse for homeowners. If you sell within the first 5 to 7 years, those hefty closing costs and realtor fees can erase any equity you've built, often leaving you with less money than if you'd rented and invested the difference. This explains why many financial experts are challenging the conventional always by wisdom. For younger individuals with uncertain job stability, or those who want to maintain flexibility for career opportunities, renting while investing aggressively often proves the more financially sound decision. Let me show you a quick example. Jessica pays $1,800 in rent, while her friend Michael bought a similar home with a $1,800 mortgage payment. But Michael also pays $800 monthly in property taxes, insurance, and maintenance. If Jessica invests that $800 difference each month in a basic index fund earning 7% annually, after 10 years she'll have about $132,000, likely more than the equity Michael has built after accounting for transaction costs. The harsh reality: in many scenarios, with proper investing discipline, renters end up wealthier than homeowners. The traditional American dream of homeownership might actually be costing you your financial freedom. Case study: the digital nomad approach. Financial freedom doesn't just mean choosing to rent instead of buy. For some remote workers, it means rejecting fixed addresses altogether. Meet Sarah, a marketing strategist who earns $120,000 annually while working from wherever her passport and Wi-Fi connection allow. Last quarter, she started in Bali, where her beachfront villa cost just $800 monthly. This quarter, she's in Portugal, paying $1,200 for a modern apartment that would cost triple in her former hometown of Boston. "I'm putting away more money each month than I ever could back home," Sarah explains. "Without a mortgage or property taxes eating up my income, I'm investing nearly 40% of what I make." Sarah represents a growing movement of digital nomads who've taken remote work to its logical conclusion. Why be tied to one expensive location when you can experience the world while building wealth faster? The numbers tell a compelling story. With remote work now available to 42% of American employees, more professionals are embracing location independence. They're discovering that breaking free from traditional housing doesn't just mean saving on mortgage payments. It means dramatically accelerating wealth building. Take Marcus, a software developer earning $135,000 annually. When living in San Francisco, his housing costs absorbed nearly 50% of his take-home pay. As a digital nomad splitting time between Mexico City, Medellin, and Prague, his housing expenses have plummeted to less than 15% of his income. "I went from barely saving to investing over $5,000 monthly," Marcus shares. "My investment portfolio has grown faster in 2 years of nomadic living than in 5 years of homeownership." These nomads are leveraging geographic arbitrage, earning high salaries from companies based in expensive markets while living in lower-cost areas. This strategy creates a financial superpower that traditional homeowners simply can't match. Consider the monthly expenses for a mid-range lifestyle in different locations. In Austin, Texas, housing costs average around $2,500 monthly between mortgage, taxes, and maintenance. Compare that to Lisbon, Portugal at $1,200, or Chiang Mai, Thailand at just $600. The difference, often $1,500 or more monthly, goes straight into investment accounts. Digital nomads typically diversify their investments rather than concentrating wealth in a single property. They maintain portfolio liquidity, investing in index funds, cryptocurrency, and other assets that don't require physical presence to manage. Beyond the financial advantages, there's the lifestyle benefit. As Emma, a freelance graphic designer, put it, "My friends back home are house-rich but time-poor and experience-poor. They're working to pay for homes they barely get to enjoy. But what about stability concerns? Modern digital nomads have solutions. Many establish home bases they return to periodically, often in affordable but connected cities. Others utilize co-living spaces specifically designed for remote workers, providing community and continuity. Technology has evolved to support this lifestyle. Virtual mailbox services scan and forward important mail. Banking has gone digital. Specialized insurance products cover global healthcare needs. Co-working spaces worldwide offer reliable workspaces and networking opportunities. What's particularly striking is how digital nomadism has democratized wealth building across income levels. It's not just six-figure tech workers benefiting. Content creators, virtual assistants, and online teachers earning modest incomes find their money stretches significantly further. Take Javier, who earns $62,000 as a customer success specialist. In Indianapolis, after housing costs, he struggled to save $500 monthly. Now, rotating between affordable international destinations, he consistently saves $1,800 monthly, more than tripling his wealth-building capacity. Many digital nomads report that this lifestyle shift has transformed their relationship with money and consumption. When you're not tied to a permanent home, you become incredibly mindful about possessions, explains Rachel, a UX designer. I've discovered I need much less than I thought to be happy. This mindset extends to their investment strategies. Without a mortgage consuming their capital, digital nomads often reach major financial milestones years ahead of their homeowning peers. Several interviewees reported achieving their retirement savings goals a decade earlier than initially projected. For couples and families, the calculations become even more compelling. The Johnson family of four left their $3,200 monthly mortgage payment in Seattle to world school their children while working remotely. Their housing costs now average $1,800 monthly across various international destinations, allowing them to invest the difference while providing their children with an immersive global education. Case study: the house hacker's strategy. Not everyone feels comfortable living out of a suitcase or roaming the globe to escape housing costs. What if you could stay put, build equity, and still slash your housing expenses dramatically? Enter the house hacking revolution, a strategy that's helping savvy homeowners like Michael turn their biggest expense into a wealth-building machine. Michael purchased a duplex in Denver 3 years ago for $450,000. Instead of viewing it as just a place to live, he saw it as both a home and an income-generating asset. He lives in one unit, while renting out the other side for $1,900 per month. His total mortgage payment is $2,400, meaning he only pays $500 monthly for housing, less than a quarter of what his friends pay for one-bedroom apartments in the same neighborhood. The rental income doesn't just offset my costs, Michael explains. It's accelerating my wealth-building journey. I'm essentially living for almost free while my tenant builds equity for me. This approach isn't limited to duplexes. Jennifer transformed her single-family home in Austin by converting her basement into an accessory dwelling unit, ADU. After a $45,000 renovation investment, she now collects $1,400 monthly from her downstairs tenant. Her $2,200 mortgage payment is suddenly much more manageable at a net cost of just $800 per month. The renovation paid for itself in under 3 years, Jennifer says, and my property value increased by nearly $80,000 because of the added rental unit. It's a win-win that slashed my housing costs while boosting my home's value. For those without multifamily properties or spare basements, roommate arrangements offer a straightforward entry point. Carlos, a marketing professional in Chicago, purchased a 3-bedroom house and rents out 2 rooms for $800 each. His $2,100 mortgage is more than covered, allowing him to live completely mortgage-free while banking the $500 monthly surplus. Short-term rentals represent another powerful strategy. Lauren bought a home in a tourist-friendly area of Nashville with an accessory structure in the backyard. She renovated it into a stylish guest cottage listed on Airbnb. While a traditional long-term rental might have brought in $1,100 monthly, her short-term rental averages $2,800 per month during peak seasons. Yes, there's more work involved with managing a short-term rental, Lauren acknowledges, but the financial difference is significant enough to make it worthwhile. I'm essentially getting paid to live in my own house. The financial impact of house hacking becomes even more impressive over time. Take Michael's duplex situation. In 5 years, while his renting friends will have spent roughly $120,000 on housing with nothing to show for it, Michael will have 1. Built approximately $60,000 in equity through mortgage payments. 2. Gained additional equity through property appreciation. 3. Spent only about $30,000 on his personal housing. 4. Generated valuable depreciation tax benefits. 5. Developed property management skills and experience. But what about the biggest concern with house hacking, sacrificing privacy and space? Successful house hackers address this through thoughtful design choices and clear boundaries. I was worried about sharing my space, Jennifer admits. So I made sure the ADU had its own entrance, separate utilities, and soundproofing. Now I barely notice I have a tenant unless I'm checking my bank account. For those concerned about management responsibilities limiting flexibility, technology has made remote landlording easier than ever. Carlos travels frequently for work, but manages his roommate situation through digital tools. I use online payment systems, digital locks for keyless entry, and security cameras for the common areas, he explains. I even have a local handyman on speed dial for emergencies. I can effectively manage my property from anywhere with Wi-Fi. This flexibility makes house hacking particularly attractive for remote workers. Unlike traditional homeowners who might feel trapped in one location, house hackers can travel or relocate while maintaining their investment. Some even expand to multiple properties over time, building a portfolio of cash-flowing assets. The challenges are real: sharing space, managing tenants, and handling maintenance. But house hackers consistently report the financial benefits far outweigh the downsides. The strategy creates a middle path between the nomadic lifestyle and traditional homeownership, offering financial advantages of both worlds. Case study: the minimalist housing approach. While house hacking offers one path to housing freedom, some remote workers are taking minimalism to the extreme. When Alex calculated the true cost of his mortgage, maintenance, and utilities for his suburban home, he made a decision that seemed crazy to everyone he knew. But the financial math was undeniable. Could living in just 400 square feet actually make you wealthier and happier? For Alex, the answer was a resounding yes. After years of maintaining his sprawling 2,400 square foot suburban home, he realized he was only actively using about a quarter of his living space, while paying for all of it. His decision to downsize to a tiny home wasn't just about saving money. It was about reclaiming his time and mental energy. I was spending entire weekends just maintaining my property, Alex explains. Now I can clean my entire home in 20 minutes, and my monthly expenses have dropped by over 70%. The tiny home movement represents a radical rethinking of housing needs. These compact, living spaces, typically ranging from 100 to 400 square feet, challenge our cultural assumptions about how much space we actually need to live comfortably. And the financial benefits are substantial. Consider the upfront costs. While a traditional home might cost $300,000 or more, a prefabricated tiny home can be purchased for $30,000 to $80,000. This dramatic reduction in housing costs means less debt and more financial flexibility for remote workers. The ongoing savings are even more impressive. The Rodriguez family traded their 1,800 square foot house in Seattle for a 350 square foot tiny home parked on a small plot of land they purchased outright. Their monthly housing expenses plummeted from $2,900 to just $650, including land lease, utilities, and insurance. We're saving over $2,200 every month, says Maria Rodriguez. That's money we're now investing or using for experiences with our kids instead of just paying for empty space we rarely used. The utility savings alone can be substantial. Heating and cooling costs for tiny homes are a fraction of what they are for traditional houses. The Peterson family reports their monthly utility bills dropped from $320 to just $85 after moving into their tiny home, a 73% reduction. Property taxes also take a nosedive with tiny homes. Since property taxes are generally based on the value and size of a structure, tiny homeowners often pay just a few $100s annually compared to the thousands that traditional homeowners face. Perhaps the most underappreciated benefit is the reduction in consumption that naturally comes with limited space. Tiny home dwellers report spending significantly less on furniture, decor, and household items. There's simply nowhere to put unnecessary purchases, creating a natural barrier against consumer impulses. When I lived in my big house, I was constantly buying stuff to fill it, says Tara, a remote graphic designer living in a 280 square foot tiny home. Now I only buy what I truly need and love. I've saved thousands just by not shopping for my home. Of course, tiny home living does come with challenges. Storage is limited, requiring creative solutions and ruthless prioritization. Many tiny home dwellers rent small storage units for seasonal items or use creative built-ins to maximize every inch of space. Privacy can also be an issue, especially for families. The Johnsons, a family of 4 living in a 400 square foot tiny home, installed room dividers and noise-canceling headphones for when parents need to take work calls while kids are doing schoolwork. Zoning regulations present another hurdle. Many municipalities have minimum square footage requirements or restrictions on where tiny homes can be placed. Some tiny homeowners get around this by building on wheels, classifying their homes as RVs, or finding tiny home-friendly communities. Despite these challenges, the financial freedom and lifestyle benefits make tiny homes an increasingly attractive option for remote workers. The math is compelling. A remote worker earning $85,000 annually might spend just 10% of their income on housing with a tiny home versus 35 to 40% with a traditional mortgage. This approach aligns perfectly with environmental values too. Tiny homes are often built with sustainable materials and designed to have minimal ecological impact. Many incorporate solar panels, composting toilets, and rainwater collection systems, further reducing monthly expenses while shrinking carbon footprints. For remote workers questioning whether the traditional housing path makes sense, the tiny home movement offers a compelling alternative. By dramatically reducing housing costs, tiny home dwellers can accelerate their path to financial independence while prioritizing experiences over possessions. 11. Redefining home. What do we really need? Tiny homes represent just one path to housing freedom, but they hint at a more fundamental question lurking beneath our housing decisions. What if everything we've been taught about home, that it must be owned, spacious, and permanent, is actually holding us back from what truly makes us happy? The data might surprise you. While we've been conditioned to equate bigger homes with greater happiness, research paints a more complex picture. Home sizes have steadily increased from around 2,349 square feet in 2004 to 2,532 square feet in 2021. But has this expansion of our physical footprints actually improved our well-being? The psychological weight of a large home often goes unnoticed until it's lifted. Think about it. Every square foot requires cleaning, maintenance, heating, cooling, and furnishing. Each room filled with possessions demands mental bandwidth, even when you're not using it. And that mortgage? It's not just a financial burden, but a psychological one too, creating constant background stress that many homeowners don't even recognize until it's gone. Remote work has completely reshuffled what matters in our living environments. When your home doubles as your office, priorities shift dramatically. The Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco found that remote workers are increasingly seeking homes with dedicated office spaces, prioritizing functionality over sheer size. This isn't just changing where we live, but fundamentally redefining what home means to us. For many young adults today, the concept of home has already transformed. Rather than viewing home through the traditional lens of ownership, they're prioritizing flexibility, affordability, and alignment with their values. The emotional aspects of housing, feelings of safety, community, and belonging, are emerging as far more important than ownership status or square footage. Take Mia, for example. She sold her suburban 3-bedroom home and now rents a small apartment near a vibrant community center. I realized I was spending all my free time maintaining a house I barely lived in, she explains. Now I have more time, more money, and more connection to my community. That feels more like home than my house ever did. Or consider Raj, who converted a van into a mobile living space that allows him to follow favorable weather while working remotely. Home isn't a mortgage or an address, he says. It's where I feel comfortable, productive, and free. His monthly expenses dropped by 80%, but more importantly, his sense of purpose and happiness dramatically increased. The shift toward remote work has triggered a fundamental reevaluation of what constitutes a desirable living environment. Many professionals now prioritize access to nature, community amenities, and well-designed spaces over sheer square footage or prestigious zip codes. This represents a profound value shift, from housing as a status symbol to housing as a facilitator of the life you actually want to live. This doesn't mean abandoning all traditional housing concepts. For some, a conventional home still makes perfect sense. But even then, the calculus has changed. Remote workers are increasingly choosing locations based on quality of life factors rather than proximity to employers. The demand for homes in suburban and rural areas has surged as people seek better connections to nature and community while maintaining their careers. The cultural definition of home varies dramatically across generations and countries. In many European and Asian cultures, multi-generational living arrangements are common and celebrated. In contrast, the American fixation on single-family homeownership is relatively recent, heavily marketed in the post-World War II era. What if we've simply internalized a definition of home that was designed to sell mortgages rather than enhance our lives? The emotional connection to living spaces often outweighs the importance of the physical structure itself. Studies consistently show that feelings of security, community connection, and alignment with personal values contribute far more to housing satisfaction than ownership status or property size. Yet we rarely consider these factors when making housing decisions. Young remote workers are pioneering new concepts of home that prioritize experience over ownership. Co-living arrangements, housing cooperatives, and subscription living services are emerging to meet this demand. These models offer the security and comfort of home without the financial and geographical constraints of traditional ownership. What would happen if you stripped away everything you've been taught about what makes a proper home and started from your actual needs and values? What kind of living arrangement would truly support the life you want to live, rather than the one society expects you to want? Building wealth without real estate, alternative strategies. When we strip away society's expectations about home ownership, we uncover an even more significant myth: that buying property is the only legitimate path to building wealth. What if the financial wisdom that's been drilled into you about real estate being the ultimate investment is just as outdated as the idea of needing a white picket fence? The truth is, real estate isn't always the gold mine it's made out to be. Looking at historical performance, residential property appreciation can be remarkably volatile. The Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco recently documented a jarring 24% spike in housing prices over just 2 years. Not exactly the stable, predictable growth we're often promised. This kind of volatility makes real estate far less reliable than many believe, especially compared to steadier, more diversified investment options. So what alternatives actually work? Enter real estate investment trusts, REITs. These investment vehicles let you gain exposure to real estate markets without dealing with leaky faucets or problematic tenants. Instead of putting a massive down payment on a single property, you can purchase shares in a portfolio of real estate assets that generate regular dividends while offering potential appreciation. It's real estate investing without the 3 a.m. emergency maintenance calls or property tax headaches. The beauty of REITs is how they democratize access to real estate investments. You don't need hundreds of thousands for a down payment. You can start with whatever amount fits your budget. Plus, unlike physical property that ties you to one location, REITs offer liquidity when your life circumstances change. Need to relocate for that dream job? No problem. You won't be facing those massive realtor fees and closing costs we discussed earlier. Beyond REITs, tax-advantaged investment accounts offer benefits that can rival or exceed the tax perks of homeownership. Individual retirement accounts, IRAs, and 401(k)s allow your investments to grow tax-deferred or even tax-free, depending on the type of account. Young adults focusing on these vehicles early can build substantial wealth over time without dealing with property taxes, homeowners insurance, or maintenance costs. Consider this. Many successful entrepreneurs and investors have built impressive net worth portfolios with minimal real estate holdings. They've focused instead on stock market investments, business ventures, and other asset classes that offer better returns with less headache. This trend is growing as younger generations prioritize flexibility and seek investment strategies that align with their mobile lifestyles. The data backs this up. Today's young adults are more than twice as likely as older investors to believe that traditional stocks and bonds alone cannot provide above-average returns. This belief has led them to explore alternative investments, like cryptocurrency, startup equity, and even collectibles, some of which have delivered exceptional returns that traditional real estate simply can't match. Speaking of alternatives, the digital revolution has democratized access to investment opportunities that were once reserved for the ultra-wealthy. Art, collectibles, and other alternative assets are now available through fractional ownership models on various platforms. These investments allow you to diversify beyond traditional financial products while potentially capturing impressive returns from previously inaccessible markets. Columbia Business School research reveals another important factor. Remote work is fundamentally reshaping real estate investments for the long term. This shift means the location mantra of real estate investing is becoming less relevant, making more flexible investment strategies increasingly attractive. Take Jamie, for example, a software developer who decided against buying in Seattle's overheated market in 2018. Instead, she invested her $70,000 down payment in a diversified portfolio of index funds and REITs. For years later, while her friends who bought homes saw their properties appreciate by about 20% before accounting for maintenance and taxes, Jamie's investment portfolio grew by over 35%, all while avoiding property management headaches and maintaining the flexibility to relocate when her company opened a new office. Or consider Tyler, who skipped homeownership entirely and instead maximized contributions to his 401k, Roth IRA, and health savings account. By taking advantage of employer matching and tax benefits, he's built a substantial investment portfolio that provides greater diversification and liquidity than a home would have. My friends are house rich but cash poor, he explains. Meanwhile, I have the smart homeownership, if you still want to buy. Tyler's story shows one path to financial flexibility. But what about those who still want to own property? Did you know that a tiny percentage of homeowners use specific mortgage strategies that can cut their total interest payments by over 50% while preserving the freedom to pivot when life changes? Let me show you how they do it. The banking industry has trained us to think about mortgages in a very specific way: 30 years, minimum down payment, and borrowing right up to the maximum approval amount. But savvy remote workers are flipping this script, and their approach could save you hundreds of thousands of dollars while maintaining the flexibility you need in today's economy. One of the most powerful alternative mortgage strategies is choosing a 15-year loan instead of the standard 30-year option. These loans typically come with significantly lower interest rates, allowing you to build equity much faster. Here's the eye-opening part. By making this one change, you'll not only own your home in half the time, but also pay substantially less in interest over the life of the loan. Another game-changing approach is implementing bi-weekly payments. Instead of making one monthly payment, you make half your payment every 2 weeks. This simple shift results in one extra full payment each year, which can dramatically reduce your overall interest and shorten your loan term by years. The best part, you'll barely notice the difference in your budget, since the payments align with typical bi-weekly paycheck schedules. Making additional principal payments whenever possible is another powerful strategy. Even small extra contributions directly toward your principal can significantly reduce the total interest you'll pay and shorten your loan term. An extra $100 to $200 per month might not seem like much, but over time, it can save you tens of thousands in interest payments. Perhaps the most important strategy for maintaining financial flexibility is buying well below your maximum approval amount. This approach gives you breathing room in your monthly budget and prevents you from becoming house poor, a situation where a disproportionate amount of your income goes toward housing costs, leaving little for savings or discretionary spending. My friends who followed the traditional mortgage advice are house rich but cash poor, explains a remote software developer who purchased a home at 60% of his approved loan amount. Meanwhile, I have the financial flexibility to travel, change careers, or even start my own business without worrying about making a massive mortgage payment. Strategic location choices are another crucial consideration for remote workers looking to own property. Rather than focusing solely on proximity to employment centers, they're evaluating markets with favorable rental parity, areas where the monthly costs of owning are comparable to renting. This calculation becomes even more relevant as location-independent workers can choose to live virtually anywhere. Consider Melissa, a remote marketing consultant who purchased a modest home in a mid-sized city with strong rental parity. I paid attention to the ratio between purchase prices and rental rates in different neighborhoods, she explains. In my area, I pay about the same monthly amount as I would to rent a similar place, but I'm building equity at the same time. If my work situation changes, I know I could easily rent out my property and cover my costs. Remote workers are also strategically purchasing homes in areas with lower costs of living while maintaining their higher salaries. This approach creates an automatic buffer in their housing budget. By keeping their housing costs well below 25% of their income, instead of the often recommended 30 to 35%, they maintain the financial flexibility to adapt to changing life circumstances. The key to smart homeownership in the remote work era is treating your home as both a place to live and a potential investment that could be converted to a rental property if needed. This mindset shift means prioritizing features that would appeal to renters, choosing locations with strong rental demand, and ensuring that potential rental income would cover your mortgage payment and expenses. By implementing these strategic approaches, you can enjoy the benefits of homeownership without surrendering the flexibility that makes remote work so valuable. You'll build equity while maintaining the freedom to relocate for personal or professional reasons, truly getting the best of both worlds. Calculating your true housing costs, the real math. Those homeownership strategies sound promising, but what if I told you that a $300,000 home typically costs over $25,000 per year beyond your mortgage payment? Before you commit to building equity, let's walk through the shocking math that banks desperately hope you never actually calculate. Most homeowners I've talked to have never sat down to figure out what their house is really costing them. They know their mortgage payment, sure, but that's like knowing just the tip of a massive financial iceberg. The true cost of homeownership remains hidden beneath the surface, silently draining wealth while creating the illusion of financial progress. Let me show you how to calculate what your home is really costing you. First, we need to start with a comprehensive formula that captures all expenses. For a typical $300,000 home, your monthly mortgage payment might be around $1,300, but that's just the beginning. You'll need to add property taxes, approximately $3,000 annually, homeowners insurance, around $1,200 yearly, and maintenance costs. Maintenance is where things get particularly sneaky. For a $300,000 home, you're looking at an average of $6,000 per year just to keep everything functioning properly. This isn't for upgrades or renovations. This is simply the cost of fixing what breaks and maintaining what works. When you add all these expenses together, you're looking at roughly $25,800 annually for that $300,000 home. And we haven't even factored in utilities, HOA fees, or special assessments yet. But the math gets even more interesting when we consider how long you'll actually stay in the home. The average homeowner in America sells after about 13 years, long before their 30-year mortgage is paid off. This timing is particularly unfortunate because it's precisely when you're finally starting to build meaningful equity. But then you sell and restart the high-interest early years of a new mortgage. Let's see how this plays out in the real world. Take Jessica from Denver, who purchased a $350,000 home 5 years ago. Her mortgage payment is $1,600 monthly, which seemed reasonable compared to rising rents. However, when we add her annual property tax of $3,500, insurance at $1,400, and typical maintenance costs of around $7,000 per year, her true annual housing cost jumps to $31,300, over $2,600 monthly. If Jessica sells in another 5 years, as statistically likely, she'll have paid almost $160,000 in interest alone, plus roughly $70,000 in taxes, insurance, and maintenance. That's $230,000 spent on a home she'll have lived in for just 10 years, not counting her down payment or closing costs on both the purchase and eventual sale. In contrast, consider Mark in Charlotte, who rents a comparable home for $1,800 monthly. His total housing cost is exactly that $1,800. The landlord handles maintenance, insurance, and property taxes. If Mark invests the difference between his rent and what Jessica spends on her true housing costs, about $800 monthly, he could accumulate over $120,000 in 10 years at a modest 7% return, potentially outpacing Jessica's equity growth without the risk of market downturns or unexpected repair costs. The calculation becomes even more eye-opening when we factor in opportunity cost. If Jessica made a 20% down payment of $70,000 on her home, that money could have been growing in the market instead. At a historical average return of 7 to 10%, that $70,000 could have grown to well over $100,000 in 5 years, completely separate from the monthly savings. What's particularly important is factoring in the probability of selling before your mortgage is paid off. Many homeowners repeatedly restart the high-interest early years of mortgages throughout their lives, never reaching the equity-building later years. Each move triggers thousands in transaction costs that further erode any wealth-building progress. To truly assess your housing situation, create a spreadsheet that tracks 1. All monthly and annual housing expenses. 2. The opportunity cost of your down payment. 3. Projected selling timeline and associated transaction costs. 4. Comparison to equivalent rental properties in your area. 5. Potential investment returns if you invested the difference. This comprehensive calculation often reveals that many homeowners are unknowingly spending double or triple what they think on housing, significantly impacting their long-term financial health. The future of housing, emerging models for the remote work era. While those financial calculations might seem depressing if you're stuck in the traditional housing mindset, what if you could live in the mountains this summer, the beach this fall, and a vibrant city next spring without owning any of them? The remote work revolution isn't just changing where we work. It's completely transforming what's possible in how and where we live. As remote work solidifies its place in our economy, innovative housing models are emerging that would have seemed like science fiction just a few years ago. These new approaches are challenging our most basic assumptions about what home means in the 21st century. Co-living communities specifically designed for remote workers are popping up across the country and around the world. These spaces offer the perfect blend of private living quarters alongside shared workspaces and community areas. Imagine a modern apartment complex where residents have their own private bedrooms and bathrooms, but share gourmet kitchens, co-working spaces with enterprise-grade internet, fitness centers, and social areas. These communities are designed to combat the isolation that can come with remote work while providing all the amenities needed to be productive. But perhaps even more revolutionary are the subscription housing models gaining traction among location-independent workers. Companies now offer membership programs where you pay a monthly fee for access to a network of fully furnished homes across multiple cities or countries. Want to spend winter in Miami and summer in Colorado? No problem. Just book your next destination through the app, pack your laptop, and go. These services handle everything from utilities to cleaning between stays, essentially turning housing into a service rather than an asset you're tied to. Small towns across America are seizing this opportunity too, creating what are now known as Zoom towns. These communities, often in beautiful natural settings, are actively recruiting remote workers by offering incredible incentives. Places like Tulsa, Oklahoma, Savannah, Georgia, and Tucson, Arizona are offering up to $10,000 in cash incentives, relocation assistance, and community perks to attract remote workers. One town in West Virginia even offers free outdoor gear rentals, along with their $12,000 relocation package. As remote work becomes more entrenched, the housing market is expected to adapt further, with an emphasis on creating living environments that cater to the unique needs of remote workers, including access to nature and community resources, explains one housing expert. The financial sector is catching up too, with innovative lending models emerging to accommodate this new reality. Some forward-thinking lenders are now considering remote work income patterns when approving mortgages, even when applicants plan to live in multiple locations throughout the year. Others are creating specialized loans for properties that will be part-time residences and part-time income generators, recognizing that the line between home and investment property is blurring for many remote workers. Forward-thinking developers are creating entirely new types of communities centered around remote work lifestyles. Picture master-planned communities with built-in co-working hubs, robust fiber internet infrastructure, and a mix of permanent and temporary housing options. Some feature a combination of tiny homes, apartments, and traditional houses, all connected by walking paths, with central community spaces designed to foster connection. One example is a development in rural Vermont that combines small, energy-efficient cabins with a central lodge housing a co-working space, cafe, and gathering areas. Residents can own or rent cabins, with many choosing to live there seasonally while renting their units out during other parts of the year. The development has attracted a diverse community of remote workers who value both nature access and strong community ties. In urban areas, we're seeing the conversion of former office buildings into mixed-use developments that blend residential, co-working, and commercial spaces. These adaptive reuse projects acknowledge that the lines between where we live and work have permanently blurred. The demand for all these new housing options is driving real innovation in design too. Homes are being built with dedicated office spaces, soundproofed work nooks, and flexible rooms that can transform from guest bedrooms to productive workspaces. Natural light, outdoor access, and robust connectivity are no longer luxuries. They're necessities for the remote work lifestyle. What makes these new housing models truly revolutionary is how they prioritize flexibility over permanence. They recognize that careers, relationships, and personal preferences evolve over time, and your housing should be able to evolve with you without financial penalties or the hassle of selling property. Your personal housing decision framework. All these flexible housing options sound amazing, but they're worthless if they don't align with what matters in your life. Did you know that 21% of Generation Z report their parents never taught them how to build financial wealth? That gap in financial education often leads to housing decisions based on outdated advice rather than personal needs. Let's break that cycle with a decision framework that puts your values first. The traditional approach to housing decisions starts with what you can afford according to a mortgage calculator. But what if we flipped the script and started with what actually matters to you? Revolutionary, right? Instead of letting banks decide your housing future, let's build a framework that begins with your unique priorities. Step 1 is defining your core values around housing. Ask yourself, what do you genuinely care about? Is it having space for creativity, being close to nature, maintaining flexibility to pursue career opportunities, or building community connections? For some people, stability and putting down roots might be paramount. For others, the freedom to pick up and move as opportunities arise might matter more. Neither is wrong. They're just different value systems that require different housing solutions. Next, consider your current and future career path. If you're working remotely with a stable position, your options are vastly different than someone climbing a corporate ladder in a specific city. Map out your likely career trajectory for the next 3 to 5 years. Will you need to change locations? Are you building a business that might require different spaces? Might you switch careers entirely? These questions help determine how much flexibility you'll need in your housing arrangement. Financial literacy plays a crucial role in this process. Young adults often face significant hurdles in achieving financial literacy due to limited access to formal financial education. Without structured guidance, many rely on informal sources that may not provide adequate knowledge for making major housing decisions. Programs like the FDIC's Money Smart for Young Adults curriculum can help bridge this gap with comprehensive modules on budgeting and building credit history. Now, let's create your personal housing criteria matrix. Take a piece of paper and draw a grid. On one axis, list your housing options: traditional homeownership, house hacking, co-living, tiny home, digital nomad lifestyle, long-term renting, etc. On the other axis, list your personal criteria: financial impact, location preferences, space requirements, maintenance responsibilities, community access, and flexibility needs. Rate each option against your criteria using a simple 1 to 5 scale. This visual approach helps you see which housing models actually align with what matters to you, rather than what society says you should want. Let's look at some example personas to see how this works. Maya is a remote software developer who values location independence above all. She loves experiencing different cultures and doesn't want to be tied to one place. Using the matrix, Maya discovers that a digital nomad approach scores highest for her, with subscription housing services as a close second. Traditional homeownership scores poorly on her flexibility needs, despite societal pressure to settle down. Connor prioritizes community and financial efficiency. As a young entrepreneur, he needs to keep costs low while building his business. His matrix reveals that house hacking scores highest, allowing him to own property while generating income to offset costs. The social aspect of having carefully selected roommates also satisfies his community needs. Sophia and Alex are planning a family and value stability, but also want to maintain connection with nature. Their matrix shows that a smaller home in a rural area with strong internet infrastructure provides the perfect balance, giving them ownership without excessive space to maintain, plus the natural environment they crave for their future children. The rise of remote work has profoundly influenced these housing choices. As location independence becomes increasingly important, young adults can choose homes based on personal preferences and cost of living rather than proximity to work. This shift means you have more power than ever to align your housing situation with your authentic values. Remember, financial capability includes not only the skills learned through financial literacy, but also the ability to access financial institutions and products effectively. Use interactive budgeting tools to help you understand the full picture of different housing options based on your specific situation. Don't forget to factor in the intangibles that mortgage calculators never consider. How much does privacy matter to you? Do you thrive with regular change or prefer consistency? How important is having a personal garden or workspace? These qualitative factors often impact your happiness more than pure financial considerations. The remote work revolution has completely flipped the script on traditional housing decisions. As we've seen, about 35% of Americans now work remotely, creating unprecedented flexibility in where they live relative to where they earn. This shift has been so significant that according to the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, remote work accounts for a whopping 60% of housing price growth during the pandemic. People like Ryan Coulter, who relocated to Perry County, Indiana for a $7,000 cash incentive, show us that housing decisions can now dramatically transform your financial trajectory. Remote workers increasingly prioritize affordability and quality of life over proximity to employment centers. As economist Ollie Wolf points out, this fundamentally changes how we should approach housing decisions. The freedom to disconnect where you live from where you work represents one of the greatest wealth-building opportunities of our generation. You can now earn in high-cost markets while living in affordable ones, invest the difference, and potentially build wealth faster than any previous generation. The mortgage system was built for lifetime employment at a single company, but you live in an era of